We're now going to talk about long run adjustment. And I want to start by highlighting, especially to those of you who have taken other economics courses already, or to those of you who will take more economics courses in the future. Economics uses this concept of short run and long run a lot in the generation of its models or in talking about its models. Okay, and in general, short run just refers to a short period of time, maybe a couple of days, a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. And long run refers to some longer period, maybe a couple of months or a couple of years. Okay, but we never really narrow it down and say the short run is anything less than 12 weeks and the long run is anything greater than 12 weeks. We never get to that point. Instead, the demarcation between short run and long run is always left a little bit fuzzy. All right, and that's to get at this essence of we're not, the short run and long run might vary from market to market and situation to situation. So we don't want to pin it down and give a particular time period when we're talking about short run and long run. Okay, so that's the first point to make about it. The second point I want to make, and again, this is especially for those who've taken economics before, is that the long run definition will vary from model to model a little bit. So always short run is a shortish period of time and long run is a longish period of time, whatever that may be. But the definition of what it takes to be in the short run and the long run will vary from market to market. So for example, here, we're going to talk about short run and long run. The demarcation is going to be whether entry or exit of firms has occurred fully or hasn't occurred fully. And that's going to be our definition of short run versus long run in a perfectly competitive market setting. But for example, if you take a macroeconomics course, you might talk about short run and long run being the period of time when inflation either occurs or does not occur in the marketplace. Okay, so that's not completely, but it's a different demarcation between what short and long run is and what's going to make the distinguishing feature between the short run and the long run. So I want you to be aware that short run and long run will have different definitions in different models. And that means you've got to pay attention and sort of figure out, okay, what's the shortest period of time in this model represent? What's a longish period of time? And that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so I'm going to give you just one definition of long run here, and then we're going to go with it. Okay, the bottom two bullets is going to be what's going to inspire the movement from the short run to the long run in this model. Entry of new firms, we're going to imagine, is going to occur whenever there are positive profits being earned by firms in the marketplace. Okay, so whenever firms are making money, that's going to act like a signal. And people out there in the rest of the economy are going to go, hey, why are they making money over there when I'm making less over here? Why don't I just open up a business and compete in that particular market? That's what it takes to enter as a new firm. You close up your old firm, you open up a new firm, and you start competing in this new product. And that's what entry means. Okay, exit. Exit of incumbent. I'm using the term incumbent here to the firms that are already in place. They're already producing. And some of those firms are going to exit as a result of sustained losses. Okay, so just losing a little bit might not cause you to exit, but eventually the fixed costs are going to run out. Firms are going to start to exit the industry if they're making negative profits or losses for too long of a period of time. All right, so let's see what happens in our market as a result of that. Let's consider the following situation. And you'll notice I've got the representative firms diagram on the right-hand side and the entire market with the capital Q on the left-hand. So I've got little q on the right and big Q on the left. We're going to sum up those representative firms in this direction to get to the market supply. It doesn't matter which side I put the representative firm diagram and which I put the market diagram. Now, let's suppose that the market, supply and demand, looks as it does on the left-hand side. And let's take for granted or given that the equilibrium price that's actually going to prevail in this market for this particular product is going to be P star. All right, now let's imagine that average cost and marginal cost curves are as drawn on the right for the representative firm. And when we take that price, P star, back to the representative firm and say, what will this firm do? We take that price over to the marginal cost curve, find the intersection, carry it down to the quantity axis, and that's going to determine for us a quantity little q star for the representative firm. But what's most important here is that at this price and quantity, because the price is well above the minimum average cost of production for the firm, this firm is going to make profit given by this checked box area. P star minus AC at Q star is going to give me the profits that the individual firm is going to make. And remember, this isn't just the profit for this firm, it's profit for every firm that's producing the product for this marketplace. So every firm, the thousands and thousands, are all making positive profits because we assume they all have the same cost curves from firm to firm to firm. Okay, that's a simplifying assumption we make to keep our analysis nice and simple. Okay, well, what's going to happen next? Positive profit is going to inspire entry of new firms. This is what we're going to imagine and the story we're going to tell in moving from the short run to the long run. Entry is new firms. And new firms are going to come from somewhere else in the economy. It's going to mean, somebody's shutting down a bakery and opening up a hardware store instead now. Somebody's quitting their job somewhere and they're starting a new firm over here to produce and supply this particular product. So lots of people will come up with ideas that, hey, maybe I should produce and compete in this market because people are making money in this. There's money to be made and I want to be part of that. So new firms are going to start to enter the marketplace. Now, under the assumptions of perfect competition, if one firm enters the market and starts supplying another Q star worth of the good, that's going to have no noticeable effect on the marketplace. The supply curve will stay where it is. It's going to be too small to represent any change in the total market. So one new firm does nothing. But that's not what we're talking about now. Now we're not talking about entering one new firm. We're thinking that hundreds or thousands of new firms will respond to the call, respond to this positive profit signal and say, hey, I'm going to open up a business here and I'm going to open up a business over there. And everybody around is going to start opening up an extra business because of the positive profits to be made. So new firms, many new firms are going to enter the marketplace. As the new firms enter the market, because there's many of them, it's going to increase total supply. Supply in the total marketplace is going to be affected because many, many firms are coming into the market. All right, and that means when we come over here to the market supply, what's going to happen is that this supply curve is going to start to shift to the right. Again, because of the entry of many new firms coming into the marketplace. Now, let's say it shifts from S to S prime over here. If it does, the price is going to fall to this level. Let's call it P2. And if I carry that price over to the representative firm, here's P2. We're going to carry that over to the market, the marginal cost curve there, and recognize that what's going to happen is Q2 is going to be a little bit lower than Q star. Right? And as a result of that drop in quantity and drop in price, the total amount of profit is now going to fall to this level right here. So profits are going to be reduced as a result of the extra supply and the lower price that prevails in the market. But if the price were to fall to P2 only, and firms continue to make this positive profit, profits are still greater than zero. So it's going to continue to be entry. We're not in the long run yet because we still have a process where new firms continue to be inspired by the profit and keep entering the market. And we expect now, given the logic of our story, that that entry will continue as long as there are profits to be made by the representative firms. So where are we going to end up in the end here? What we're going to have to end up with at the end is that in order for us to stop this process and actually end up where there's no more entry to take place, what has to happen is that the price has to fall to this level. Let's call it P bar. Because at this level, P bar, when the price is equal to minimum average cost, profits are equal to zero. And zero profits send a signal that, well, I might as well continue doing what I'm doing because I'm not going to make any more money if I move into that industry. Okay, but for that price P bar to come about, let's see if I can draw this effectively. The supply curve is going to have to shift all the way out to S double prime here. And that's going to generate a price of P bar. And that's when the entry process is going to stop and we actually end up in the long run. Okay, so the long run equilibrium that we're going to describe and talk about from time to time is going to be an equilibrium where the price in the marketplace adjusts so that the price comes out to be equal to the price that would generate minimum average cost in production. All right, because that's the only price that's going to give you zero profits and therefore zero inducement for new firms to enter the marketplace. As long as the price lies above P bar, as long as it lies above, it's going to continue to have profits, and so therefore entry is going to continue, and we're not yet in a long-run equilibrium in the marketplace. Okay, so this entry, I should say, is going to inspire lower prices, it's going to inspire lower profits, and that's going to continue until profits are equal to zero. That's the final ending point of the long-run adjustment in a perfectly competitive market setting. This is the summary of what I've just said. This bullet point here is kind of important. One of the assumptions we make, and we made this in the pure exchange model earlier, we made it all through, is the assumption of perfect information. All right, and this is kind of a critical assumption here because I'm gonna ask and think about what happens if we don't have perfect information in this setting and why that's going to mess up the process that we just described. So by perfect information, we mean here, in this case, everyone outside the industry knows that profit is being made. Okay, you have to know, in order to be induced to enter, you need to know that there's a realistic possibility that you're going to be able to make money if you enter that particular business. And so perfect information is going to mean that you know that and you know to enter. Now, just think for a minute, though. What if you're a small private firm operating somewhere and you're making a bunch of positive profit? You know that if more firms enter your market, it's going to push supply up and the price down and your profits down as well. So as an individual firm, you would actually have some incentive to try to keep quiet the notion that you're making positive profits. You don't want people to know that you're making a lot of money because you know that that's going to inspire people to enter your business. So there's actually, when we start thinking about this a little bit deeper, we actually find incentives now for firms not to provide perfect information or give information about what's going on inside of them to other people. And this is actually a very common sort of business proclivity, one might say, trying to keep all of its information about what it's producing, how it's producing it, what its costs of production are. It doesn't want its competitors to know any of that information because knowing that information enables them to compete more effectively against them. Okay, and so this perfect information assumption is important in order to generate the result we're showing. But we can also see, when thinking about it, how tenuous this is and why we really shouldn't expect there to be perfect information in a real world setting. There's lots of reasons why firms are going to try to prevent that from happening. There's a second realm, though, here where perfect information plays an important role. And that occurs because of the assumption that all of the firms have exactly the same costs of production. We imagine there's a representative firm and we've got an average cost curve that's got a particular minimum. We're imagining every firm has exactly the same cost functions. In order to do that, we're imagining perfect information, which means every firm that enters knows exactly what they need to do in order to produce at a minimum and can make those appropriate decisions. That is a very, I would say, brave assumption in a sense. It doesn't match reality because firms really don't know perfectly what other firms are doing, nor do they know all the time how to produce something as efficiently as other firms who have been operating for a period of time have done. Okay, so here's an example where we're making a simplifying assumption so that the model works out easily. If we drop this assumption, a whole bunch of stories start to open up about how things could work differently and how we might not get the result that we're depicting here. So let me just emphasize this one more time. Suppose we don't have perfect information. Suppose individuals don't know that firms are making positive profits in the industry. In this case, what would happen in the long run? Well, the answer is positive profits could be hidden for a long period of time, and we might not get entry of new firms, and we might not get falling prices if others don't know that firms in the industry are making positive profit. So you see how you've got to make those assumptions of the knowledge being there in order to get the result that we're displaying in this particular model. For that reason, we would say perfect information is made to simplify the model so we can understand how things would work in a simple setting. But we're also, that perfect information is extremely consequential to the result. If we drop that perfect information assumption, we're not going to get the same results that we're displaying in this particular model. All right, so again, strong emphasis on how these assumptions we're making generate the conclusions that we're getting, and then by playing with these assumptions, so-called relaxing them, dropping it for a moment in time and thinking about the implications, we start to see how important these assumptions are in generating the results that we're displaying. Let's do another situation real quick. In this situation, we've got the price at P star, supply and demand in the marketplace on the left-hand side, but notice that that P star is at a level that's below the minimum average cost in production. And that means, and let's imagine that average variable cost is down here maybe, just for argument. Okay, so the firms would stay in business at P star, but they would be making a loss given by this area up here. Okay, so here we're depicting a market situation where the firms, representative firms, are losing money, all of them, but not enough to go out of business yet because they still have to cover their fixed costs of production. Now, we could ask, what's going to happen in this particular circumstance? Well, in this circumstance now, maybe nobody goes out of business at first in the first week, but remember that every firm amongst the thousands of firms operating here are likely to have different fixed costs, or at least fixed costs for different periods of time potentially. So some might have lease on their property or their office space expiring, a year from now. Other firms might have the leases expiring in 1 month, and they can just cut loose and reduce their fixed cost to zero very quickly. So what we're going to expect to happen amongst many firms where maybe they have staggered contracts is that the losses, the fixed costs, are going to disappear, kind of not in a regular way all at once, but sort of gradually, one by one, firms will start to eliminate their fixed costs and begin to drop out of business. And so what's going to happen is that losses are going to inspire exit eventually. So slowly, one by one, firms are going to start to drop out of the marketplace. Now, 1 or 2 firms exiting, no big deal. It's not going to affect the market supply because 1 or 2 or 3 firms are too small to affect the market dynamics, if you will. But exit of many firms that's eventually going to occur is going to tend to shift the supply curve now leftward instead. Okay, so it's going to shift to some place like S prime. As a result of the shift in supply, the equilibrium price in the market is going to rise up to something like P2. Okay, and if it rises up enough, it's going to become equal to this price, let's say, P2, which is at minimum average cost. So here's the thing. As many firms begin to exit the market, supply falls. I should say market supply falls. And remember, supply is measured along this axis. So if I say supply falls, I'm not going up and down here with the supply curve. I'm going left or right. And supply falling means I have to shift to the left because supply is measured on the horizontal axis. So market supply falls, and that inspires an increase in the market price. And as the price goes up, profits of the individual firms go up as well. So notice that here at Q star, the individual firm is making a loss, But once the price in the market rises up to this level and quantity increases to Q2, then profits are driven to zero. So profits go up until profits are equal to zero. So here we've got the adjustment process in reverse, right? So firms losing money start to exit the industry one by one. That exit leads to reduction in total supply to the market, causing an increase in the market price. Increase in the price eventually leads to extra production by each individual firm and eliminates the losses that we're making previously. Profits get pushed up until, again, they're equal to zero. And once zero, we have no more adjustment that we can tell. There's no inducement to leave the industry, no inducement to enter the industry. We're in what we would call a long-run equilibrium in the marketplace. All right, and so that's what we think a long-run equilibrium will look like. Notice that in the long run, the price has to end up where profits are equal to zero. And that means the price in the long run has to be equal to minimum average cost of production. That's kind of a cool feature, because what it's telling us is that in this adjustment process where firms are responding to profits, trying, again, to make as much money as they possibly can, they're going to adjust their presence in the market, increase or decrease, until they get to a price that actually generates the minimum average cost of production. That's like saying, hey, we've been able to reduce the per unit costs to its lowest level possible, but the market adjustment is going to automatically lead the firms to produce at that particular level. That's kind of, that's an amazing result. And it's the kind of result we get in a perfect invisible hand sort of scenario, where we've got individual firms, again, responding only to their own self-interest, trying to do what's best individually for themselves, and yet they're led, we could use the term, as if by an invisible hand, to produce a quantity of the good such that it minimizes the average cost of producing that individual good. And that's a pretty cool result that comes about, admittedly, in this very simplified model or world that we're describing in this particular story. Okay, but still, that it can come about in the story is pretty notable. All right, and here's the step-by-step of the exit that I just talked about.